What's up guys? Today I'm doing a comparison video between the Logitech Brio 4K webcam versus the new Obsbot Tiny 4K. And for a long time, the Logitech Brio 4K has been considered by many to be the king of 4K webcams, but we're going to see if the Obsbot Tiny 4K can knock it off of its throne. So we're looking at video from the Logitech Brio right now. Both of these webcams are set with a resolution of 3840 by 2160 and 24 frames per second. I won't be doing any 60 FPS tests today because in 4K, neither of these webcams can record at 60 frames per second. So I'm recording at 24 frames per second to make the most economic use of the lighting in the room. And in the beginning, both of these cameras are going to be set completely in their automatic default modes from the factory, and we're going to change into manual modes and see if we can get better video quality out of either one of these cameras and see which one is the winner by the end. And as I mentioned, this is the Logitech Brio set in complete automatic mode. I'm going to switch over to the Obsbot 4K right now, and we can take a look at the picture quality of the Obsbot. Alright, so this is the picture quality of the Obsbot Tiny 4K, set completely in automatic with no adjustments being made to the manual settings of the camera at all. I think out of the box with the default settings, the Obsbot 4K trounces the Logitech Brio. I think the Brio basically looks overexposed and kind of washed out, and but there are some manual settings that we can go through, and maybe we can improve the manual quality of the video, and maybe by the time it's all said and done, the Logitech Brio will actually be better than the Obsbot, but we need to actually do that and take a look at both. Here in automatic mode, I'm going to talk about my gripes with each camera, and let me set them side by side so that you can get an idea of what they actually look like side by side. Give me a second here. Okay, so here's the Logitech Brio side by side with the Obsbot Tiny 4K, and you can see what I was talking about with the Logitech looking washed out and overexposed. I've got like some hot spots here and hot spots on my finger here, and yeah, it's really got some exposure problems going on. But again, this is in complete automatic mode, and I'm speculating that when I set these cameras into manual modes, I can get better quality out of the Logitech Brio. In automatic mode, my biggest gripe with these kind of cameras is if you watch what happens. So you see I move my hand here. Watch the ceiling here as I move my hand. You can really see that the cameras dim and brighten back up as there are changes to the lighting. So there's some kind of lighting compensation going on with both of these cameras. And as if you watched my original video on the overview of the Obsbot 4K, you'll know that there's no way to change that even in manual settings for the Obsbot, but we can see that in automatic mode the Brio is actually a little bit worse. The major contributing factor to the Obsbot's image quality is its sensor size. The Obsbot is a 1/2.8 inch sensor. We're just going to say it's a 1/3 inch sensor for ease of, layman's terms and keep things easy and flowing. And the Logitech is a 1/4 inch sensor. So the Obsbot sensor, it doesn't sound like much of a difference, but that's actually quite a bit as far as like camera image sensors go. Neither of those are very big in camera world, but in webcam world, both of these have very huge sensors, but the Obsbot is a massive sensor for a webcam. I'm not going to do any kind of tracking or zoom test with the Obsbot because the Logitech has no tracking capability. If you want to see how well the Obsbot does its tracking, check out my original video on the Obsbot 4K where I show it in comparison against the original Obsbot Tiny 1080, and you can see how well it tracks there. But we've spent enough time looking at both of these cameras in automatic mode. I'm going to do some changes to both of these cameras, and I'm going to see if we can get a better image quality. And really what I want to see if I can do is fix a lot of this dimming and brightening, which I know that I can't on the Obsbot, and I think that they are working on that for a firmware update. Don't hold me to that because I don't represent Obsbot in the least. As far as this Logitech goes, I'm pretty sure we can dial this in and fix what's going on here. So we're going to make some changes to both of these cameras and dial in the manual settings and see which one is the better camera after everything's set in manual mode. Okay, so first off here, we're going to see if we can make some changes to this Logitech Brio and see if we can really get this dialed into a better picture. So I've got the Logitune software open now, and we can take a look at this and see what we can do with this camera. And something that I forgot to mention that you can clearly see is that the field of view on the Logitech camera is a lot tighter than it is on the Obsbot. That is a give or take kind of thing, depending on what you want. I actually prefer a tighter field of view because I'm working in a really small room here. I would rather not have a big wide angle, but you can actually make it tighter if you want, but it's just punching in on the image. So we're just going to keep that at 90. And we do have some digital zoom with the Brio as well. I am not a fan of digital zoom. I don't even use it on the Obsbot 4K. So we're going to leave that right where it's at too. For the autofocus, we're going to leave that on, though we can shut that off and dial it in with manual focus. But again, I'm just going to leave the autofocus on for these tests, and we're going to compare the autofocus between the Logitech and the Obsbot later on. And for color adjustment, we can go with these different like filters. Ugh. Okay, I'm just going to leave this at original, and then we're going to go in here and look at these manual adjustments. So first off, what I found with webcams is the exposure and white balance are way out of whack on most of these if you leave them on auto. So I'm going to turn off auto exposure, and wow. But turning off auto exposure does get us a little bit closer to, it looks like the frame rate dropped really bad once I turned off auto exposure. What? Let's turn that back on. I've never seen that with a camera before. I turned off auto exposure and the frame rate went really wonky. Watch this. Watch what happens here. That's really weird. Okay, so I'm going to leave auto exposure turned on. I'm going to turn off auto white balance. Oh my. That looks pretty good right there. Brightness, contrast, saturation, sharpness. There's really nothing else. Maybe take down saturation a little bit. Yeah, this the auto exposure killing the frame rate is really, really disappointing. That is makes this Brio very, very underwhelming. And I'm going to get a ton of dislikes on this video for anybody who's spent money on the Brio now, I'm sure. But hey, it is what it is. I have eyes, you have eyes, you can see what happens when we turn that on. Auto white balance, we'll leave it right there. But yeah, I was thinking that this auto exposure was really going to jack up the taking the auto exposure off was really going to jack up the quality of this camera, and it would fix that lighting compensation that's going on with the brightness and dimming there. But it is what it is, so we're going to leave that on. I mean, we can actually turn that off, but at what cost, man? At what cost? So I think this is about the best we're going to get with the Brio. So if anybody has any kind of suggestions for improving the video quality of the Brio that I've overlooked here, post them in the comments. But I think this is the best it's going to get. One other thing that I'll check out here is I'm going to go back in here. I'm going to set, maybe turn off HDR and see if that makes any difference. Okay, so it's the HDR. As long as we leave the HDR off and then manually dial in the exposure, but we've got to take it. Well, no, no matter what we do, using manual exposure on this camera kills the frame rate. So if anybody is aware of a workaround for that, post that workaround in the comments below, but this is unusable at this point. Okay, so one other thing I wanted to take a look at here was to see if it's going to make any difference if I change those settings through the control in OBS Studio. I don't think it's going to make any difference, but I'm going to give it a shot anyway just to kind of rule out anything. So I'm going to set the exposure to manual, and it's dialed up as high as it'll go. And again, the frame rate has gone all to hell there, so that's definitely not going to work. I was hoping that what might be a workaround, but no luck there. Maybe turning on low light compensation. No, it's still, I think the image looks better, but the frame rate sucks now, so we can't use this. So we'll go ahead and look at some of the other settings just to make sure we don't miss anything. Yeah, we're going to have to just go with auto exposure here, which that's terrible because that's the thing that kills the image quality of this camera. All right, so based on those tests, I think this is the best we're going to get with the Logitech Brio. And again, I'm not above being wrong. If I've done something wrong, if I've overlooked something, post a comment below and let me know something else that I could look at to possibly make this thing better. Now we're going to look at the manual settings of the Obsbot 4K. Okay, so now we're going to take a look at the system settings of the Obsbot Tiny 4K and see if we can get a better image quality out of this in manual mode. And just to kind of cut to the chase and spoil the results, you can't. I've messed around with the manual settings in the Obsbot quite a bit here, and you really don't get a better image quality out of the Obsbot with its manual settings. This is really kind of the best that you're going to get out of it too, and that's something that I'm hoping that they will improve. But if it comes at the cost of killing the frame rate like what the Brio did, then don't even bother. But anyway, I'm going to mess around with the manual settings just so that you can see for yourself and you can see what options we have here with the Obsbot 4K. But let's see, I'm going to go into configure video here. And here we can see the Obsbot Tiny Cam properties, and mainly over here we've got exposure control, and we can take that up and down. But as you see, if we drop the exposure, the image gets all grainy. So if I set this to manual, I find that it's best leaving it at -5. If you want something a little bit brighter, if you need something brighter, you can go higher. But really, I've found that the auto exposure does a pretty good job of taking care of the image quality here. This auto aperture, it doesn't do anything. I don't know why it's even there, even an option, but that's not, you've got no control over that. And there's no aperture control with this camera anyway. We do have manual focus, but I'm just going to leave that alone. I'm going to leave it on auto. And again, I'm going to do an autofocus test on both of these cameras and show you the difference between the two. And another spoiler, that's where the Brio is going to win this contest. It has much better autofocus. There's no low light compensation back here on. I am gonna set this to manual, and I'm just gonna leave it at -5. But as we can see, I'm gonna apply it. But as we can see here, after I do that, the problem with the dimming and brightening, it still doesn't change that. And I've got another webcam, the one that I talk about a lot that I really like. That's a great budget $60 webcam, is this Nexigo N660p. And when you set the manual settings on that camera, everything stays locked where you want it to be. And I really like that. You don't get this like brightening and dimming and brightening and dimming. And anyway, let me go over here and see if there's anything else we can change. We can set the white balance manually. Wow. That's pretty good right there. I'm just going to leave that at that. And that's really about, if you want to jack up your saturation or take it down, you can. Again, sharpness, you can take that up or down, but I'm just going to leave it alone. I think it was at 2. I'm going to leave that alone. And our power line frequency, because I'm in North America, 60 hertz. And gain doesn't seem to make much of a difference here. As I'm moving the gain slider, I see some flickering in the video, but I've got my window open and it's sunny out, and there's a tree out there and the wind's moving those leaves around too, so that could have something to do with it. I'm just going to leave that alone. No, I've not touched it, and the gain, it's not making any difference. So I'm going to apply everything now. I've got this set in manual over here, and I've got white balance set in manual. So with both of these cameras dialed in with manual settings under what I would consider the best case scenario, at least under my lighting, I've got these dialed in manually on the best settings that their manual settings allow, and everything else set on auto. This is what you can expect out of both of these cameras. And I mean, I think it's a clear-cut winner. It's a clear victory for the Obsbot 4K. And I mean, it's not even close as far as like the video quality goes. The Logitech Brio looks washed out. Like I said, I've got some hot spots here in my face. Both cameras are doing the dimming and brightening as they overcompensate for lighting, but like at this distance, and I'm arm's length away from both of these cameras, the Obsbot Tiny 4K is the absolute clear winner, no doubt about it to me. If you disagree, be sure to post in the comments section, but I think that the Logitech Brio looks soft. It looks overexposed. It just doesn't look all that great. And I don't know the price on the Obsbot Tiny 4K. I think it's still in development, and you can get like early bird pricing over on the Indiegogo page. But when it's released, I wouldn't expect that it's going to be much over $200 if it breaks that $200 pricing threshold. Don't hold me to that, because I don't represent Obsbot, so I don't know what their pricing scheme is going to be when it's all said and done. But the Logitech Brio, the normal price on this is $200, $199. I got this one for $177 on Amazon, and I mean, I don't think that it's worth that money. I think that $177 is well on your way to buying a good used DSLR with a lot of where you can, if you're buying this for a good image, you might as well just save your money. Go for something like this instead, where this is only $50 to $60, and then you can save that money towards a DSLR. Now, where I think that the Obsbot 4K is kind of worth it for that money is, say you're doing presentations online and you're moving around and you're doing, the Obsbot makes up for it with its tracking controls, where you need to do a presentation in front of a whiteboard. Or another great example of using the Obsbot would be a very animated preacher who moves around from his pulpit a lot. For a church live stream, the Obsbot Tiny 4K would be amazing. As amazing as both of these webcams sensors are, like I said, the Logitech Brio has a 1/4 inch sensor. The Obsbot Tiny 4K has a 1/3 inch sensor. Those are both small sensors in the world of cameras. So if you want to use the Obsbot Tiny 4K for a church live stream, keep in mind that most churches, the lighting sucks in there. So even though this is an amazing webcam with a giant sensor for a webcam, you may have to consider the lighting in your church if that's something that you want to use this for. But ultimately, I think that if you are going to use a webcam for a church live stream, the Obsbot is the clear choice. You're not going to get a better sensor in any webcam than the Obsbot Tiny 4K. There is like the AverMedia, their big fancy, and the Elgato, their new webcam. But honestly, I haven't had my hands on either one of those cameras, and if they have a bigger sensor than the Obsbot Tiny 4K, I would be surprised. I've looked up online to see if I could find some sensor size information on both the AverMedia, it's like the 513, and the Elgato, whatever their new release is, and I couldn't find information on either of those camera sensors. So if anybody knows what the camera sensor size in either of those webcams are, please post that information in the comments, because I couldn't find it. So I've spent most of this video trashing the Logitech Brio, and I think it's for good reason. At this price point, for a 4K camera, this thing sucks. Now I'm back in complete automatic mode for both cameras, and I'm going to do an autofocus test with this little bank here. So here we go. This is with the Obsbot Tiny 4K. On the bank, all right, so it looks like it got focused there. Back on me. Back on the bank. Okay, we're good. Back on me. And back on the bank. And there we go. And back on me. So as we can see, the autofocus on the Obsbot Tiny 4K really isn't very fast, but that's not necessarily a bad thing, and I'm going to talk more on that here in a minute. But I'm going to switch over to the Logitech Brio, and we're going to do the same autofocus tests now. All right, so we're back on the Logitech Brio now, and we're going to do those same autofocus tests with this little bank. So here we go. On the bank, it got it. Back on me, and it got it. Back on the bank, and it's taking its time this time around. Come on, you can do it. That was faster that time around. Back on me, and it got it. And back on the bank again. And it looks like it got it. No? All right, so I would say for the most part, the Logitech Brio is a little bit faster with the autofocus. Okay, so I would consider that neither of these cameras have exceptionally fast autofocus, but I would say that the Logitech Brio is noticeably faster than the Obsbot 4K when it does come to autofocus. I said earlier that the autofocus being slow isn't necessarily a bad thing, and that is really just kind of my opinion, but I'm going to explain why I do have that opinion now. And I would rather have slow focus that stays locked on its target than focus that loses very easily and then decides to start hunting. And one thing that drives me nuts when I'm watching video is when you see the background bouncing because the camera is doing focus hunting. The Obsbot may be slow with its autofocus, and I'll give this to the Brio too. Both of them are kind of slow with their focus, but they both stay on their target really well once they get their target. If I move around a little bit, it's not going to lose its focus just because I stepped a couple inches out of one way or the other. But I'm going to wrap this one up now. I think I covered just about everything I needed to cover in comparison for these two cameras. If there's anything that I missed, if there's anything that I can do to improve the quality of either of these webcams, post your suggestions in the comments section below, and I will definitely try whatever I can do to drum up a rematch between these two cameras. But in my opinion, the Obsbot Tiny 4K wins. And thank you so much for watching. I know this has been a long, rambly video, but I wanted to cover everything for anybody who's been considering either one of these cameras. And at the money, I got to give it to the Obsbot Tiny 4K. But that's it for now. Thank you so much for watching, and I'll see you next time.